Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Hello, Malcolm. Good, and you?
Yeah, good to be on this webinar.
Yeah, definitely.
And hello,
Looking
and
forward.
good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all the participants joining across the globe. My name is Malcolm Xavier, and I have Christopher with me on this session.
Thank you for the introduction, Malcolm. I'm Christophe Mazzola. I'm a CISO and cybersecurity expert, especially focused in ISO 27001. And we are here with Malcolm to discuss about DORA and NIS 2. But first, let's mention that.
So, Christopher, as we go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, Christopher, as you mentioned, that you wanted to talk about DORA. I'm really excited to hear more about DORA and what exactly it is. Maybe once you're done with the DORA part, just for the audience, I will speak on the NIS2 directive thereafter. And let's keep it, if the audience have any questions, we will reserve the last 10 minutes for the Q&A.
Sure, that sounds great. So first, let's talk about DORA and just mention that PUCB launched a new course about DORA, the lead manager training. You will receive the notification in the very short notice, but we are happy to share that DORA lead manager training course is available over the next couple of days or next week, probably. So let's talk about the agenda. Regulation versus directive. What are the differences? We will cover that. We'll cover DORA with myself, NIS2 with Malcolm, and then the Q&A section. But first, directive. We have the NIS2 directive and the new regulation DORA. And let's try to discover the main difference. We have difference about the definition, the implementation, and the enforcement of directive and regulation. A directive, this is a legislative act that sets out a goal that all EU countries must achieve, but the directive does not define how the goal should be obtained. Then we have the regulation. This is a binding legislative act that must apply everywhere in Europe without requiring anything from the member states. Then we have the implementation. With the directive, it must be transposed into national law. We have that currently with NIS2. With the regulation such as the GDPR, it's automatically become law in all member states simultaneously. Then you have the enforcement. It depends on national authority and the specified national law to enforce the directive NIS2. And the opposite, the DORA regulation, such as the GDPR, will be enforced uniformly across the EU by relevant Europe-wide and national body. We have also a lot of difference between directive and regulation from the purpose or the impact on compliance, such as the directive is intended to harmonize national law, while the regulation ensures conformity on law across all EU member states. Okay? But now let's talk about DORA and let's decrypt the brand new EU regulation DORA. Let's go first on the strategic mission of DORA. The strategic mission of DORA is to ensure that the financial sector in Europe can handle and recover quickly from any type of technology-related disruption or attack, aiming to keep the financial system stable and trustworthy. That's a very big strategic mission. So DORA, for the Digital Operational Resilience Act, is a new regulation enacted in December 2022, entering into force in January 2023, and it will be applied to financial institutions in less than 12 months, the 17th January 2025. Let's have a look on the difference, on the relation between the EU regulation and directive. First, we'll have a small focus about NIS2. DORA and NIS2 aim the same goal to enhance digital resilience and mitigate cyber incidents within the EU. Okay, DORA will take precedence over NIS2 to avoiding overlap. In the law talk, we talk about lex specialis. Okay, the general does not derogate from the specific. And then DORA is built on the GDPR requirements. So this is a real link between GDPR and DORA, and it does not override them. and then the Cyber Resilience Act, and to increase cybersecurity posture across a large range of industry, while DORA focused only on the financial entity. Then, is DORA really new? That's the question I'm asking when I ask myself when I prepare that training, that webinar, sorry. Because if we look at the content of DORA, what are the EU directive regulation asked to us? Encrypt data at rest and in motion, isolate and encrypt backup, test your backup, implement MFA and any means of secure authentication, incident management, monitoring and loading activities, secure development lifecycle, batch management, supplier management, security awareness program, penetration testing. Is that sound really new to you? I don't think so. But it's a way to force companies to do the must-do task in order to what we consider as a cybersecurity and information security specialist as the basic posture when you manage billions of dollars, right? But if we look at that list, there is something really interesting that come up in my mind. Is the ISO 27000 family help to end compliance to DORA regulation? Yes. ISO 27001 help to leverage governance, structure, and global approach on information security. We talk about information security risk management with DORA. Yes, ISO 27005 can be leveraged for that. We talk about business resilience. Good news, ISO 22301 for the business continuity management system allow you to do that. Having similar approach to implement DORA is the right thing to do, the right approach among others, of course. But such as ISO 27001 is pragmatic, such DORA is. And so after some control from ISO 27001, such as threat intelligence and vulnerability management, there is no explicit requirement for pen test. We have one for DORA. So let's go a bit deeper about the 5 pillars of DORA, because there is at least 5 pillars. We have the ICT risk management, you have the ICT related incident management and reporting, and the digital operational resilience testing. Last but not least, we have the management of ICT third-party risk. That slide coming from the great DORA lead manager course that I strongly suggest to follow because the content is just top-notch. But is the DORA really revolutionary if you look back at what we have in that EU regulation? Yes, there is a revolution in risk management because DORA mandates strict oversight and management of third-party ICT service provider. Yes, we have that in ISO 27001 with the Annex A15, information security in supplier relationship. That's a thing. But here DORA go a bit further. They introduce a requirement for financial entity to maintain a register of all the information regarding their ICT third-party relationship and risk management policy. It requires a due diligence process and ongoing monitoring to manage and mitigate risk associated with all the third-party service providers. And what does that mean? Why it is a revolution? Because there is a revolution aspect to it. The regulatory framework brings critical ICT third-party supplier service under strict regulatory oversight for the very first time, at least from my knowledge and experience. They will create the oversight framework and a lead overseer will be appointed in order to manage all those critical ICT suppliers. In the way, there is a big revolutionary aspect because you will have no unified standard about risk management for ICT third-party service supplier. You will have a comprehensive coverage because you need to cover all the aspects from technical measure to governance framework, and that will be asked to all the critical ICT third-party supplier. And they will be under regulatory scrutiny because it's not simply audit from your customer, it will be a regulatory body that will come and audit you. And believe me, that's the move. At least I expect that move will reshape how financial institutions manage external risks. And as we see a lot of different change across the compliance landscape, thanks to GDPR, we might have the same with DORA. So as an impact, it will address the key vulnerability, and the critical service provider will have to meet those security standards. So yeah, is this a revolution in risk management? Yes, I don't know who you are and how bad your vendor risk management is, but they will come to find you and they will come to audit you because this is what the oversight framework is and this is what the lead overseer will do. But wait a minute. I can continue to do about the lecture about DORA, and I'm sure some people will be interested about that. But there is one specific information that I want to leverage here regarding the critical aspect of the ICT third-party supplier. Not so long ago, I discussed with one of the clients of my client, and this is a bank actually. And we talked about DORA at the end of the meeting, very interesting meeting. And I was not expecting to see them over a long time. And at the end of the meeting, they say, "Oh, see you in a few months to talk about DORA." I said, wait a minute. What are you talking about? We are not a critical ICT supplier to you. Yeah, but we decide that all our ICT supplier will become critical, and we ask them to have what we can call a DORA readiness state. That's an interesting fact, and this is how you can actually leverage directive and regulation as a marketing tool and competitive advantage. Let's have a look at what the historical context with GDPR. We have a lot of companies that jump into GDPR as a marketing tools and as a trust factor, and they were right. A lot of public claim has been performed about GDPR compliance, and it's helped companies to gain initial trust, right? We have a short lifespan now, between now and the next 12 months, where you can leverage this first-in-class strategy. Be ready before your competitor and ask marketing to brag about it. Check the DORA Executive Act and gain and be sure that you're ready before your competitor. Take ownership of the situation and check all the list of control, the one that you really have and the one that you really need. So like that, you can even go to your executive and say, hey, we have a possibility to leverage new business with DORA in mind. I will need that specific budget because I want that specific tools or that specific process or that specific penetration test for my organization. And then leverage early compliance by discussing with your sales team and your marketing team by being the first mover, by leveraging that first mover advantage, right? Use that 12 months period from now where you can be that first in class, because this is something that does not happen every year, right? To actually have a new Euro directive or Euro regulation. Use that as an opportunity to leverage new business, to leverage new sales opportunity, and in the same time to leverage new requests from budget requests from your management. And yeah, work with sales and strategy in synergy. We always mention that marketing, that cybersecurity and information security team should work across the whole organization. This is the perfect example where you can work end-to-end with marketing and sales to leverage new business and leverage that early compliance and direct yourself with finance and banking sector. Then, okay, we talk about the company now as a personal, as a professional expert. Can you leverage that as well? Yes, indeed, you have also that now to 12 months to leverage as well that first-in-class strategy. As I mentioned, PSCB mentioned release a new DORA lead manager course for that. Be certified before the other. Be one of the first to jump on board of the certification and leverage business opportunity by being one of the very first to gain that certification. We have that with NIS2 that appears on the market in November 2023. And if you're a trainer, well, you can receive a lot of requests by providing training about DORA or NIS2, because you will be one of the first to be PSCB trainer to do so. So train, use the opportunity, use that new Euro directive and new regulation as the marketing tools and competitive advantage to your own benefit. Okay. Last but not least, is DORA and NIS2 two sides of the same coin? Perhaps there is one hidden truth behind DORA and NIS2. Both DORA and NIS2 represent the European Union effort to standardize cybersecurity and operational resilience acts across key sectors. Both DORA and NIS2 will serve as benchmark for global security standards, influencing policy beyond Europe with their approach to digital resilience. We saw that with GDPR. GDPR was the world-leading data law that changed how companies work, and how, just as GDPR became a global gold standard for data privacy, these regulations are set to fundamentally reshape cybersecurity practice across the world. And just as GDPR revolutionized data privacy and protection standard globally, DORA and NIS2 will do the same for cybersecurity. And initial skepticism about GDPR in 2017, 2018, we can see the same parallel with DORA and NIS2. But both DORA and NIS2 are pragmatic, and measures shall be reasonable and proportionate. And this is a bit of the hidden truth behind DORA and NIS2. How to demonstrate pragmatism? You can't. You demonstrate that you effectively mitigate risk across your organization. And basically, this is what the DORA regulation and NIS2 regulate directive once. That's it for me.
Thank you, Christopher. That was a wonderful one. I think you just want to remind the audience about the DORA Lead Manager Training course provided by PECB that will be available. So you can refer to the chat window for details around it. Hello, everyone. I think, Christopher, if you can go to the NIS2, maybe I'll take some time to speak about NIS2. And if the audience have any questions about DORA, please note your questions and put it in the chat window. Yeah. So my name is Malcolm Xavier, and I've been working in the cybersecurity industry for a long time. I've been working rather in the industry for about 20 odd years. I'm currently based out of UK and work with one of the largest refineries in the UK. So because we are a critical national infrastructure, we do work with the government regulatory bodies. So hence I thought that this will be a good opportunity to share about NIS2 directive, right? Although the NIS2 directive is not applicable completely in the UK, more on the EU side. But this is a topic that we are very well aware of, and hence it's good to discuss this topic, right? So in brief, we will be discussing about what NIS2 directive is. We'll look at the introduction part of it, the purpose and the significance of NIS2 directive, the timelines, we'll look at the history of NIS in general, then the key changes from the previous framework, which was NIS-D, the relevance of cybersecurity in today's interconnected world, and we'll look at what organizations needs to comply with the updated NIS requirement. It's very important to understand, which organizations fit into the NIS2 directive, and then we'll look at the practical steps, the best practices and challenges. It will be our best effort to discuss this in the very short time we have. So we can go to the next one, Chris, please. So primarily, in brief, the NIS2 aims to get the EU up to speed and establish a higher level of cybersecurity and resilience within organizations within the European Union, right? The new directive brings into scope most sectors. If you ask what was in NIS1, NIS2 focuses in getting more sectors under its control or scope rather, and it focuses on providing guidelines to ensure uniform transposition in local laws across the EU member states. Organizations should start preparing by defining their compliance roadmap and optimizing their cybersecurity awareness. So as I mentioned, the primary goal is just to achieve a high level, a common level of cybersecurity across the EU members. There are 27 member states which can be referred to on the the NIS2 directive site. There are 46 articles in there, and the penalties I mentioned. I'll come to the penalties later in the slide. But yes, the deadline for the transposition into the national law is October 17th this year, 2024, right? We can go to the next one, Christopher. We'll look at the overall journey for NIS in this particular slide, right? I talk about the NIS2 timeline and the important dates. So if you need to understand when, how NIS actually existed. So in July 2026, right, the Directive of Security of Network and Information System was established. This directive aimed to increase the cyber resilience across the European nations through regulatory measures. It focused on strengthening cybersecurity capability at a national level, enhancing collaboration between the member states, and incorporating cybersecurity in its DNA for organizations. So the scope of organization that had to comply with the NIS directive consisted of two groups: the operator of essential services, which is also abbreviated as OES, and the relevant digital service providers. So currently, the NIS directive is in effect for several years. It basically, when NIS was released, they wanted to trigger a change in the mindset within the institutions and bring out some regulatory approach to cybersecurity, right? But again, there were many challenges. If you look at the timeline, in July 26th, it was released. Then NIS2 came, was tabled at the Parliament, and it was voted in May 2022. After that, once it was voted, the official journal was published in November 22, and finally NIS2 was approved in December 22. And now we are basically, since January 23, we have been talking about NIS2, and it is in force. But yeah, the deadline for transposition of this regulation into law is October 17, 2024. This is when each of the member states will actually implement the law within their own states, right? And after the implementation, the EU authorities will continue to monitor, or continue to work around to review how organizations or institutions have adopted the NIS2 directive and how compliant they are, right? So this is what exactly is in NIS2. If we go to the next slide, we will talk about the extension of the scope, Christopher. Yeah. So before I talk about the purpose and the significance of the NIS2 directive, I would like to talk about the extension. So when NIS2 existed, there were few companies or a few entities that were covered, but now NIS2 defines two categories that are essential or part of the scope. The very first one is basically important and essential, the essential operator of essential services, and the second one is the important. So the first one is essential entities, and the second one is important entities. So in the essential services, when you look at essential services, you'll have the transport, the banking, financial services, healthcare, digital infrastructure, energy, drinking water, right? But when it comes to important entities, it's digital providers, manufacturers, research organizations, food production companies or distribution, post and courier, manufacturing, and waste management. So it's important to understand the essential entities and the important entities. So individual organizations have to assess themselves and register themselves against the NIS2 directive. And there is a process where they have to submit their name, the addresses for the registration, right? And afterwards they will get some guidance from the regulators. So the purpose and the significance of NIS2 directive is pretty simple. They want to enhance the level of cybersecurity across the European Union. And again, it builds on the previous NIS2 directive and addresses the evolution or the evolving of the threat landscape, the technological advancement, and the increasing resilience on digital systems. So you will hear that a lot of companies are going through digital transformation, and also what's happening in the globe as of now in the geopolitical conflict era. You need to be more resilient, and that's why this directive, right? So again, the primary principle of NIS2 is to establish a harmonized framework for managing cybersecurity risk and incident, thereby safeguarding essential services and entrusting trust in the digital economy, right? If we can go to the next one, Chris, please. Yeah. So again, the significance is, again, what do we achieve, or what does the European Union achieve by introducing NIS2? Is basically, the strengthening of the scope. Initially, they identified some gaps in this one, and they just want to make sure that they strengthen the scope. So hence, NIS2 extends the scope beyond essential services to also broader range of digital service providers, such as online marketplaces, cloud services, and also search engines. The focus is more on risk management. It emphasizes on risk management practices, to ensure that organizations assess the existing risk and manage cybersecurity risk effectively, and also improve incident reporting. So it mandates that the organization under the NIS2 directive are reporting incidents to the national authorities. And there is cooperation around it, cooperation and collaboration rather. Again, in terms of cooperation and information sharing, so the directive encourages cross-border cooperation amongst EU member states and facilitates information across, sharing those information swiftly. So what happens with sharing is, another important element that I wanted to share is the new directive. There's an intention to improve the cooperation of the EU member states regarding cyber incidents and threats. So what they've done is they've created the ENISA, which will, which is an entity which basically established the European Vulnerability Disclosure Database to facilitate knowledge sharing amongst the member states. So that's a great achievement that they'll have. And I think in general, just be aware of the penalties, for essential entities, the penalty is different, and for important entities. So for essential entities, the admin fines could be up to 10 million or at least 2% of the total worldwide turnover for the previous fiscal year of the company. And for important entities, the admin fines are up to 7 million or at least 1.4% of the total worldwide turnover for the previous fiscal year. So it's important to understand the significance, the fine, and why the enforcement is there. I think, Chris, we can go to the next one, please. Yeah. So key changes we discussed previously. What are the key changes? It's just broadening the scope. The scope has been broadened, and there are more strict requirements around, what they just want organizations to impose rigorous security and promote a culture of cybersecurity in general amongst critical national infrastructure or operators of essential services. And again, there is a stricter supervisor measure and higher sanctions for non-compliance, right? So here we understood the significance, we understood what has changed. Now let's understand how do we prepare, right? How organizations can prepare for NIS2 in general. Yeah, so, even before we go there, we need to understand the relevance of cybersecurity in today's interconnected world. I previously mentioned about the geopolitical situation, right? So I wanted to talk about the relevance in today's interconnected world. If all the organizations are taking steps, whether it's a small scale or a mid-sized company, they want to protect sensitive data, right? They're focusing on business continuity. National security is important in this era. If anything, if any of the key essential services are compromised, it will directly have impact on the people and impact on the economy, right? And hence, the relevance of cybersecurity is important in today's interconnected world. Privacy, as Chris mentioned about GDPR and the evolution of GDPR and DORA, privacy also is in the focus. There is global collaboration, but what EU expects is all the member states at least to collaborate at that level and share common data that will help them improve the maturity, right? And the emerging technologies are helping to improve the processes. So it's just people, process, and technology that can work together to help cybersecurity evolve, right, and take care of the evolving threats. And at the end, it's companies or individual organizations cannot achieve, compliance levels without collaboration or without the efforts from the people, from the employees, the contractors, and the partner ecosystem. So it's individual responsibility as well. I think, Chris, we can go to the next one. So how do organizations prepare, rather, right? What do they need to comply to stay updated with the NIS requirements? So it starts with risk management. When I talk to a lot of industry peers, it always starts with risk management. Understand your landscape, understand the risks that exist in your environment, and thereafter, weigh down, do a quantitative and qualitative risk analysis and try to identify mitigation plans. So it always starts with risk management, and there is more accountability. The NIS2 directive wants corporations to have more corporate accountability, where senior management are held accountable. So there are letters being sent to organizations where the senior management have to respond and say that they will take care of cybersecurity initiatives, right? There are reporting obligations, so there will be regular audits that will be that will be conducted, and organizations have to respond to those questions that are being raised by the regulators and accordingly comply with the regulations, right? And organizations are being asked to kind of plan their business continuity and also at least achieve a security baseline by a particular date. So all these details are mentioned in the document, right? So when you implement a risk and information management system, which is also covered in the ISO standard, the ISO 27001, which is the information security management system, you basically, you want to aim to identify the threats, not just identify, but monitor and mitigate those threats, right? So it comes, I mean, when I talk about risk management, I also want to emphasize on incident handling procedures, right? Business continuity, which when it's business continuity, backups and DR, disaster recovery plans, right? Those are important that our organization should maintain and practice and test those. Supply chain risk management has been discussed a lot, in the market, especially with across the manufacturing industry, and it is essential that it is considered as part of your risk management exercise. In terms of policy and procedure development, a lot of organizations would struggle with policy and procedure development activities. So once you get in touch with, or maybe if you have trained staff and you want to improve governance, risk, and compliance, that would be the focus area under GRC, right? And then, the best practices within cybersecurity is always, make sure that you use the right level of encryption, cryptography, and the multi-factor authentication. Always keep people aware, right? So those are the important factors that I wanted to stress upon. And culture is very important. So what are the practical steps, right? Some of the things that organizations can identify in this journey is, it starts with risk management. So risk assessment is needed as the first step. You identify the risk and then weigh it down and then accordingly works towards mitigation, right? If you want to establish control within the organization, you need to have your information security policies, your privacy policies in place, so hence policy development is essential. I did mention the importance of incident response plan. So if there is an incident that happens within your organization, how do you, as an organization, act when an incident is, reported by your security teams, right? And how do you report it to the CISO team or the local authority, right? Employee training is very important from an awareness perspective, as well as how to deal with cybersecurity in general. Vendor management will take care of your supply chain risk management. So awareness that you have these many vendors, and how often do you do the regular audits, right? Chris mentioned that earlier, that we will find you and audit you. So that's, the regulators will definitely find and audit you, but it is essential that organization also do conduct regular audits to make sure that they're compliant and they're ready for an external audit, right? And the practical steps, technical, but those are important. If you are a product company, or if you're a company which develops in-house products, you have to ensure that security is built in rather than an add-on, right, or bolt-on. So it has to be baked in security in general. Patch management, right? Make sure that you have a very good practice of vulnerability assessment and patch management to take care of the vulnerabilities. These days, you will hear a lot about zero-day vulnerabilities, which are normally announced by product vendors and OEMs. So hence, the patch management process in general is important and holds significance, yeah. And in general, right, protect your user accounts, anyone who has access to your critical data with multi-factor authentication. That's the right way to go. So those are actually practical and achievable steps. I don't think it's difficult for any organization to achieve or at least start on this journey. There are best practices from a cybersecurity perspective. Defense in depth, it's like the onion layer, right? Add more defenses. Think about, if you have a firewall, think about, do you have a perimeter firewall? And do you have a DMZ firewall? Is there microsegmentation? Is there zero trust that has been implemented? So think on those lines. Continuous monitoring is essential. So organizations have a security operations center where they do their threat detection and threat monitoring. So that has to continue. Encryption level data has to be encrypted at rest, in transit, and in motion. So review your encryption processes. Access reviews can be done. Now, these days, a lot of organizations are adopting identity and access management as a serious topic and implementing privileged access management tools that actually monitor how a privileged access is being used, and the sessions are recorded for auditing purposes, right? So threat intelligence is important. There are various sources where you can get threat intelligence from. There are the government regulations. Chris, you would agree. Government is also sharing intelligence with a lot of organizations these days. And it's not just using intelligence, but also checking if there are any threats on your environment by conducting threat hunting using those intelligence, right? Collaboration is important with your industry peers in general, and that's why we take an opportunity to meet industry peers, discuss, share the knowledge that will help the cybersecurity as an industry to evolve. In general, incident communication. So if you have an incident response plan, make sure that it's tested as well. Conduct tabletop exercise, make sure that cross-functional teams are engaged in those incident response plans, and that will help you improve your communication bit. And privacy by design, so it is important that you protect the privacy of your own people, your partners, and the wider ecosystem, right? There are many challenges. I've tried to list few of them. I think Chris will add. Feel free to add, Chris, if there are any more challenges that I haven't added here. But yeah, it is complex, right? But if you start with the practical steps and you follow best practices, then I think things could become simple. But yes, there are a lot of challenges, and then many people in the market today do not understand what NIS2 directive wants organizations to achieve. So it's important that you read about the directive, download a copy from the website and read about it. We've tried our best to give you an overview. There are many challenges, there are resource constraints. Not any organization, right, you deal with will not have unlimited budget, right? But they will have to run the business, but at the same time, the regulation is enforcing compliance. So there will be resource constraint, but you have to do the best possible in the available budgets that you have. There has to be cross-border coordinations, not just among the EU, but any partner ecosystem that you're working with. But again, that's up to how the organization works with the wider supply chain and works accordingly. And the evolving threats will evolve. There are nations, threat actors. You have to make sure that you consider them. And as I mentioned, the intelligence and the threat hunting will help you address those challenges. And you have to balance security with usability. You can't really block everything and upset the users, right? You have to let the business operate. Cybersecurity, there is a term that how much security is enough. It should be just enough so that you do not interrupt or impact how the users function in an organization, and you should not impact their user experience. But at the same time, you have to protect the organization, right? Vendor compliance are essential, and that the same thing can be done with vendor vetting, the DPIA exercises, the various questionnaires, cybersecurity questionnaires that vendors fill, and also the vendor management team would take care of the compliance. The audits actually help achieve vendor compliance. And at the end, humans are the weakest in the cybersecurity chain, right? So employee awareness is important so that you educate them on the most common threats so that they can be protected, at least protected from the threats like malware, phishing attacks, and so on, right? So these are the practical steps, best practices, and challenges that are related to the NIS2 directive. It is achievable. It's just that it needs a pragmatic approach, as Chris mentioned earlier. Thank you. And Chris, what do we have?
What do we have after the Q&A session? But I just wanted to add a little thing about the complexity. Effectively, you say that it's complex, especially for people who are not aware of those directive regulation, and it's totally fine. Those texts are not made for the normal user to be read and understood. It's for the legal team. Okay, so you have ChatGPT, put that in ChatGPT, you will have that simplified. But joke aside, cybersecurity to be adopted need to be simple. Think post-it about cybersecurity. I love that phrase because people put post-it on their camera because it's simple and efficient. Try to think about all the measures that you need to implement, no matter if it's for NIS2, DORA, or just for the sake of security. Think about simplicity. Everything has to be simple, otherwise you will not grow the culture of security, cybersecurity, and information security across your organization. That was the word of the end that I wanted to add for the complexity challenge, because indeed it's complex. It's meant to be complex. This is why we have those directive and regulation, but it needs to be simplified, and that's up to you to bring that simplicity over that layer of complexity.
Understood. So I think we tried, Chris and I tried our best to cover most of the topics. I think the PCB team has shared the LinkedIn details for Chris and me. If you feel connecting to us, and if you have any questions, happy to answer whatever they may be. But if you do have any questions, I don't know if any of the audience have popped down any questions in the chat window. Let me just open the chat window.
I don't see any so far, or perhaps I didn't receive any. Perhaps the audience is sleeping because of our both intervention, or they are drinking a coffee. We answer all their questions, is even better.
Thank you, Christophe and Malcolm, for this highly informative webinars. There have been a lot of questions put down
great.
from the audience. I will read some of them now, as we have time for. So let's start with the first one. Does DORA only apply to financial institutions, or does it also apply to financial processes of other institutions, for example, financial services of hospitals?
It's applied to financial entities, not to a specific department of a financial department within the organization.
Another question is, are there any special companies that can verify or make audits against DORA to verify its compliance with an organization?
We have now a company who help about being NIS2 compliant, so having that NIS2 readiness. We have that with ISO 27001. We certainly will have the same for DORA as well. There is so far no organization, public administration, or regulatory body that do that. You have a lot of information on the ESA, so the European Supervision Authority for the DORA, that give a lot of guidelines in order to be compliant. But so far there is no initiative yet from the regulatory body.
Another question is, can an ISO lead auditor lead a DORA audit? And the follow-up question is, NIS2 are also certifiable by an ISO 27001 lead auditor?
Well, let Chris answer the DORA part. I'll answer the NIS. Chris?
Okay. Yeah, regarding DORA, being a lead auditor, I mean, you're knowledgeable about audit technique, skills, and so on and so forth. And you also have the knowledge about information security. If we look at, if you want to audit about DORA and ensure that you're good to go for DORA and to be compliant against DORA, yeah, you need to have good technique of auditing. You need to have a good knowledge of information security. So yeah, I think from an auditor perspective, this is what you need.
Yeah. And from a NIS perspective, I did mention previously during the webinar that there is an information security management system that aims to identify threats, monitor them, and basically mitigate the threats. So in the ISO 27001, if you are ISO 001 compliant, that means you're pretty much addressing the areas that we highlighted in the practical steps. You would have a risk management process, you'll have incident management procedures, business continuity, crisis management, the supply chain risk management pretty much will be there. And these are part of the ISO 27001 in general. So there isn't a certification that I'm aware of in the NIS2 directive. It's just complying. You have to comply to the regulation or the directive. There will be audits that will be conducted from the regulators, and you just have to answer and provide evidences of how well you are doing in individual areas, and accordingly they'll come back with feedback. And if you're not doing well, obviously you will be given some time to collate those evidences. If not, then they will be fine. So the answer to the question is I haven't discovered any certification on the NIS2 area, but it's primarily if you have the ISO 27001, at least that covers most of the areas that are mentioned in the NIS2. But again, NIS2 applies to essential services and the important services as well, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, we move on to the next question. When DORA and NIS2 are basically the same sides of the same coin, or the two sides of the same coin, why the duplication of the regulations is taking place? How can it be brought up as a single standard or a single regulation?
It's a good question. Actually, I joke about the fact that this is two sides of the same coin, because effectively the ultimate goal is the same, but the target audience is not the same. We have some different change in the control that are needed in DORA. For instance, I didn't mention that, but you need to have a trade lead penetration test. That's something that is mandatory if you want to be DORA compliant, because you manage billions of dollars in the financial entities, banking, and so on. And so you need to really have that pen test requirement. This is a requirement that is not part of the NIS2. For NIS2, you need to manage vulnerability at least, such as the ISO 27001. You need to manage vulnerability, but the requirement of pen test is not. The pen test is not a requirement per se, so it could be difficult to have one Euro directive for everything. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have one regulation and one directive. So that means the purpose of what is intended is different. With NIS2, you want to have the same goal, is to reduce the impact of cybersecurity incidents across Europe for essential and important entities. This is what Malcolm brilliantly said over his presentation. And DORA is to maintain a very specific sector, which is the financial sectors, the banking system, to be able to stay trustworthy even in case of incidents. So it will be difficult, to not say impossible, to have one directive for everything.
Now we have a lengthy question, so bear with me. How financial institutions will classify their third party in critical third party provider and normal party third party provider? What could be the requirements in both cases to be considered, and what are the anticipated steps of audit in both cases? Also, follow-up question: does ISO 27001 help? If yes, then to how much extent?
That's a long question. First, we will finish with the last part, which is ISO 27001 help? Definitely yes, because it gives you governance and structures, and it's ensure that you have a minimum of requirements about information security, which is a great baseline. Regarding the classification of non-critical and critical ICT supplier, we will have a statement that will be done by the European Supervision Authority this summer about who is considered or not as a critical ICT third-party supplier. They don't really communicate about that yet, so you must to be informed about that. And I don't want to say something stupid. So I prefer to not move toward that specific question about what are their actual requirements. So because I don't have the full answer. That being said, and as per the conversation I had with actually the information security team from a bank in Europe, they will say that all their ICT suppliers for that bank and some of the discussion they have with other banking entities, they will consider all their ICT supplier as critical, so they will align everyone on the same level, no question asked. This is the reason why I decided to share the fact that you must leverage directive and regulation as a marketing tools and business initiative, because you will need to have that DORA readiness, like you will need to be to potentially have that NIS2 readiness as well, if you want to do business in some extent. Perhaps you want to add something about that that could be linked with NIS2, Malcolm?
Yeah, I think I get this question a lot of times, that how do you identify which organization actually falls under the NIS2 directive? So I mentioned about the two categories, right? Important and essential. Right, I called out few of the organization, but in general, they have a simple scoping exercise that the authorities have come out with. They will help you identify the sectors. So you basically have to see if the headcount is over 250 or more than 50 million revenue, then you basically are in the larger, or in the large organization scale, and you fall in the medium when you have headcount of 50, over 50, and over 10 million revenue. So 10 million revenue versus 50 million revenue. So that's the differentiator between large and medium companies, right? And that's the scoping exercise, and accordingly the regulation applies to you. And the other thing that I want to stress upon is the essential entities. So make a note of the essential entities. If you're a transport company, banking or financial company, or health sector, digital infrastructure, energy or drinking water or utilities, you definitely fall under the essential entities, right? Now, because the scope has widened, they've added few more entities, which is the important entities. So manufacture, production in general of distribution of chemicals, research organizations, food production, processing and distribution, post and courier, manufacturing and waste management. So this has been classified as important entity. So it's a scoping exercise, and I'm sure that there will be some help available from the regulators if in case you're struggling there. That's all.
Thank
Any
you.
more questions?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of questions. Let's see how many of them can we address. Another question is, are members of the European Economic Area also obligated to NIS2, specifically Norway?
We'll have to open I think I haven't expanded the 25 member state, but if I pull it up and read, I'm sure Norway will be part of the EU member state list. So it does apply.
Thank you. Another question is, will governments get a fine or an extension if said government isn't able to transportation into law until October 17, 2024, because the governing body hasn't formed to be able to decide on how it shall be implemented into law?
That's a difficult question to answer in general, because there is a deadline for member states to transpose the proposal into a law, and we'll only get to know around October, if there is an updated statement around it, right? So any sector which is included in as essential entity, and if the member states have not been able to transpose the regulation into a law, and then what are the conditions around it, we'll only get to know around October timeline. Unless Chris, is there any better answer from your side?
Actually, no, but I hope they think about that solution. But no, I don't have that information.
Yeah. Okay.
Another question is, can the EU vulnerability knowledge database be accessed by all EU companies?
Yeah, so I've read this, when I was doing my research. So there will be this critical in the US. There was a practice long back where there was a database created about all the vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities database. Now this is something that's also been created for the EU because the threat levels are different for geographically, right? EU faces different threat levels and different threats. So all the member states will have access to the database. So as I read, this will be called as the European Union Agency of Cybersecurity, the ENISA, and will be mandated to establish a European vulnerability disclosure database to facilitate knowledge sharing between the member states. So it is a mandatory thing, and it will be implemented by individual bodies.
If I may just to add a little comment on that, because I read enough about that, you will have effectively a way to disclose the vulnerability as securely and proactively. But it was raised as well for the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA, in 2022. And so far, we will not have an active vulnerability database like the CISA provide for the known exploited vulnerabilities. This is something that you can actually access. So far, this is the Chief Cybersecurity Officer. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name of the NISA, who said that we will have something, but not an active database vulnerability. And I think that they mean by active vulnerability database is that we will not have something disclosed publicly.
Yeah. Okay.
Another question is, AI is emerging with a speed never seen till now. What is the impact of AI on NIS2? In other words, are there NIS2 requirements for AI?
Okay. So I will be talking about zero trust, and this AI brings, or the threat landscape is evolving because of the introduction of AI, right, in general. But if you adopt basic principles of cybersecurity like defense in depth, zero trust, microsegmentation, right, role-based access management, privileged access management, you monitor your emails, you have a SOC, you have a great vulnerability management system, then you really don't have to worry if you have the controls in place, right? It's the basic fundamentals of cybersecurity which will help you, fight against those challenges of AI. But again, all the product companies, processes, regulators are working together. The intelligence is made available to, CNIs and other companies as well as to how to mitigate the risks. So on a risk register, or a lot of organizations, they will put, the exposure to artificial intelligence or the use of AI and AI-based threats in their risk register, and there will be mitigation plans that will be, called out in the risk register.
We have time for one last question. What's the implication of DORA on African financial institutions? Will they have to be compliant with DORA to be able to interact with other financial institutions in Europe?
If we look at the text, I was thinking, I didn't pause, I was thinking. Not at that time, from what I understood by reading the text of the EU regulation, because it's a financial entity talking with another financial entity, and the main area of focus is to manage the ICT third-party supplier. Except that African financial entity work as an ICT supplier, then is supposed not to be affected by DORA per se. That being said, we saw that with the GDPR, it changed the face of the world, how company works. Actually, 5 years after GDPR entered the European life, we saw now more in data privacy regulation across a lot of countries in Europe. We have recently Algeria, we have the South Africa as well, who recently passed bills about data privacy, and we have more and more initiative about data privacy across Europe. We have some, and in some extent, I do believe that we will have the same with DORA, because it will be a game changer regulation. And then even, I don't think, from my understanding of the law, African financial entities, if they are not linked with European banking, of course, like a succursal or whatsoever, they will not be impacted by DORA yet, but be sure that in order to align the market worldwide, they will have to change in some extent. But as I show on the slide, what is asked from DORA perspective, it's very simple. We talk, as Malcolm mentioned, for NIS2, we talk about encryption, MFA, secure authentication, penetration test, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So it shouldn't be a burden to do the minimum of requirement to be DORA compliant.
Thank you, Christophe and Malcolm, for delivering this highly informative webinar. DORA Lead Manager training course in English is now available. For more information on it, please contact marketing@pcb.com. Additionally, please be informed that this session is recorded and will be posted on our website and YouTube channel, along with the slides of the presentation. Thank you both once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Likewise, it was a pleasure.